Now we have the last speaker, Jaroslav Siwulski, representative of the European Association of Jehovah's Witnesses. He will speak about this subject, the sad consequences of the persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia.
Dear Rafaela, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to address you today to talk about the problem of the unprecedented mass religious repression that has been taking place in Russia, a member state of the Council of Europe, for more than 3 years now. Jehovah's Witnesses are a well-known Christian denomination recognized in all European countries, numbering over 8 million active members in the world, or more than 20 millions if you include those who attend their meetings. They are known as a peaceful and law-abiding people. Russia has become the only country in the world to officially declare them extremists and subject them to mass criminal prosecution. To begin with, allow me to conduct a short excursion into history. Jehovah's Witnesses have existed in Russia since the late 19th century. They even tried to obtain legal recognition from the Soviet authority, but were unsuccessful. The peak of the persecution of the witnesses in the Soviet era came in 1951 with the so-called Operation North, when thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses from Belarusia, Moldova, the Baltics, and Ukraine, entire families, were exiled to Siberia in freight cars. Many did not survive the ordeal. But thanks to those events, many Russians responded to their preaching, and the number of witnesses increased, which was exact opposite of what the authority wanted to achieve. In 1991, Jehovah's Witnesses in the USSR were finally rehabilitated as the victims of political repression. Thousands received official certificates of rehabilitation, and ever since they have received small financial allowance from the states every month. I know about this firsthand, as my father was acknowledged as a victim of political repression for my faith. Starting in around 2009, the clouds began to gather over the Russian Jehovah's Witnesses again. Courts in 2 Russian regions added a large list of printed publications of Jehovah's Witnesses to so-called Federal List of Extremist Materials. This was done on the basis of the false pretext and with the help of so-called expert studies. An expert would simply say that such and such a quotation bears signs of hatred, enmity, and so on, and the courts would declare the entire book extremist. Here is the one example of such a quote. Quote, "Although Josiah was only a child, he was old enough to know that he should make friends with people who serve Jehovah. May you do the same and choose to do what is right." The expert concluded that, in saying he should make friends with those who the text implies, at the same time you should not make friends with others. This constitutes hidden propaganda of discord based on religious affiliation. A negative attitude toward people who do not believe in Jehovah is being promoted. This is one example of how ordinary expression of religious people, characteristic of any religious, are being artificially interpreted by so-called experts and as excitement to hatred. This has allowed the courts, without even thinking about it, to classify such statements as signs of extremism. The next step was the ban of several local religious organizations, LROs, of Jehovah's Witnesses on the ground that some publication from the Federal List of Extremist Materials has been found in their possession. What is important here is that it wasn't the witnesses who brought these books to their places of worship. The FSB and police planted banned publication on purpose at places of worship. The witnesses themselves immediately stopped using all publications that has been pronounced extremist. On April 20, 2017, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation ruled that since some LROs has been found guilty of possessing extremist literature, the National Office of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia, the administrative center located in St. Petersburg, should be liquidated. This was done, and at the same time, all the remaining 395 LROs throughout the country were closed down as well. At the trial, representatives of the Ministry of Justice insisted that the ban would not affect ordinary believers. It was only about legal entities, just a formal decision on paper and nothing more. But in reality, exactly the opposite occurred. As early as May 2017, Dennis Christensen, a citizen of Denmark who lived in Russia, was arrested. In the spring of 2019, the Court of Appeal upheld his conviction for extremism and sent him to prison for 6 years. He became the first Jehovah's Witnesses in modern Russia to receive a real prison term, but not the last. Today there are already 19 of them. At present, 45 Jehovah's Witnesses are behind bars. The majority are in pretrial detention awaiting the outcome of their trials. Incidentally, 2020 saw another legal first. For the first time, the authorities revoked the Russian citizenship of 2 Jehovah's Witnesses who had not been born in Russia. In May, Felix Mahamadiev and Konstantin Bajenov had their citizenship revoked. Felix Mahamadiev was recently released from prison after serving his sentence in full and immediately deported from Russia. In 2020, the authorities continued to commit acts of torture against detained Jehovah's Witnesses. On February 6, 2020, officers from Correctional Facility Number 1 in Orenburg beat with batons and kicked 5 Jehovah's Witnesses. Felix Mahamadiev was particularly seriously beaten, and as a result, he was hospitalized with broken ribs and damage to his lung. He required an emergency operation and needed drainage to remove fluid from his lungs. Several days later, on February 10th, 31-year-old Vadim Kutsenko from Chita, Zabaikalsky territory, was taken into forest and beaten, strangled, and given electric shocks. On July 13, in Voronezh, 5 witnesses reported that they had been tortured during raids or interrogations. 44-year-old Yuri Galka had his arm tied behind his back and bag put over his head. While he was suffocating, he was beaten and suffered a broken rib. The document stated that the injuries were purely domestic. Since the start of the 2021, the repressive machine in Russia has been speeded up. There are 45 people in prisons and detention cells, another 26 under house arrest, and around 1,300 searches in total have taken place. In the hundreds of criminal cases, there is not a single victim of any crime or evidence of real crime. All accusations are based on the facts of regular religious practice of any religions, reading and discussing sacred texts, prayers, songs, etc. Women, elderly people, single mothers are searched, fined, and subject to pressure, threat, and insult. The oldest witnesses involved in criminal cases is over 85 years old. Recently, 90-year-old woman Rima Vashchenko died before her criminal court could come to trial. In fact, 5 witnesses have already died while under investigation, having not been able to stand and stress of persecution. There are now 430 witnesses under criminal investigation. Many of them have been added to the official list of extremists and terrorists and can no longer use bank cards, receive a salary, purchase insurance policies, or even buy a SIM card. To make it easier to understand what Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia are having to face on a daily basis, I would like you to invite to watch a short video. If we can see now this video.
Полиция! Полиция! Лапа! Лежать! Руки за голову! Все нормально. Все нормально. Ребенка не напугайте, пожалуйста. Тихо. Все будет. Все будет. Давайте, выходите. Нормально. Ну что ты думаешь? Там ребенок спит. Тихо. Тихо. Кухня чисто?
As you can see, ordinary law-abiding citizens are being treated like dangerous criminals. If you live in Russia and believe in wrong God, the door of your house can be broken down, you can be thrown to the floor or forced to stand face to the wall with the point of an automatic weapon against you. Anti-cultists associated with the Russian Orthodox Church have played a pivotal role in the current crisis affecting religious freedom in Russia. Since late 1990s, they have purposely incited hatred in society towards religious minorities, using hate speech, far-fetched and unproven accusation, well-worn stereotypes, excite fear and xenophobia. And then they operate on the fringes of society with little influence. As was already mentioned, one of the leaders and inspiration for these movements is Alexander Dworkin, who had the Expert Council for Religious Expert Study of Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation. In Russia, anti-cult views are broadcast at the highest level by leading mass media outlets and state-run television channels. The execution of Russian anti-cults against Jehovah's Witnesses were completely displayed by the accusation of the Russian anti-cultists against Jehovah's Witnesses were completely displayed by the European Court of Human Rights back in 2010 in the case of the religious community of Jehovah's Witnesses of the city of Moscow against the Russian Federation. Alexander Dworkin played an important role in that process, unofficially directing the persecution and even testifying against them. Jehovah's Witnesses were accused of all kinds of convincible and unconvincible sins. These charges were dismissed by the ECHR as untenable. Russia had to restore the Moscow LRO and paid compensation to Jehovah's Witnesses. So then anti-cultists decided to change tactics and taken a different approach via bans of literature. As I mentioned earlier, in 2010, some publications of Jehovah's Witnesses were added to the official list of extremist literature. All that remained was on the base of this to liquidate legal organization and then use this as a pretext for the repression of ordinary religious worshippers, the majority of whom had never even been member of this organization. They were able to accomplish this very successfully. Here again, the Ministry of Justice played a vital role for which Alexander Dworkin acted as a consultant. It was the Ministry of Justice that filed the claim to the Supreme Court in 2017 to ban activity of Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, anti-cult propaganda alone would not have been sufficient to ban an entire religion at the state level. But years of large-scale work on public conscience in Russia has paved the way to create all prerequisites for the ban. Officers of the special forces, officials, prosecutors, judges, and police officers are people like anyone else. They also watch television and can be influenced by propaganda. Immediately after the decision of the Supreme Court, the Moscow Patriarchy of the Orthodox Church made it clear that they approved of the decision. Metropolitan Ilarion, an official spokesman for the Orthodox Church, who had the Department of External Church Connection of the Moscow Patriarchy, announced the decision to ban Jehovah's Witnesses was a positive step in efforts to battle against the spread of sectarian ideas. It's no exaggeration to say that Russian anti-cultists affiliated with the majority church, have succeeded in doing what has not been achieved in any other country in the Western world: to outlaw an entire religion consisting of tens of hundreds of worshippers with their following criminal prosecution simply for their beliefs. We are grateful to European and international organizations for their support of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia. Despite the numerous support of international state and non-governmental organizations, no measures have yet managed to encourage the Russian government to stop persecution of innocent people. In connection with events related above, Russian Jehovah's Witnesses have filed over 60 applications to the European Court of Human Rights. Their appeal of the Supreme Court decision to liquidate all legal entities has been given priority treatment, so we expected a decision from the ECHR in the near future. Maybe it will kickstart the situation on the ground, though on the other hand, Russia has already shown that it's capable of not implementing ECHR judgments. Meanwhile, Jehovah's Witnesses continue to trust in God and courageously speak about their faith in courts. I want to quote just a few words from 66-year-old Yuri Savelyev's last word in court. He is from Novosibirsk, and he spent over 2 years in pre-trial detention awaiting the verdict. On December 16, 2020, the Leninsky District Court of Novosibirsk sentenced him to 6 years in prison for his religious beliefs. Here is what he says in his last word. I have no enemies, and for my almost 67 years I have never been brought to administrative or criminal responsibility. By my conviction, I am a pacifist, that is against any form of violence, be it verbal, psychological, or physical. For 40 years of my working career, I have been repeatedly awarded prizes, certificates, and featured to Board of Honor of workshop and factories. I have positive reference from relatives, neighbors, and friends. I was born in Soviet Union, and from childhood I was taught to be trustful, respect my elders, honor my parents, work honestly, and lead a healthy lifestyle. This is what I taught my children. And I am ashamed that Russia is again organizing the shameful persecution of the most peaceful, kind, and law-abiding citizen of this country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Yaroslav.